The Radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
Hey everybody, welcome. Welcome to the Yaron Brook Show. Thanks for joining me on this Saturday night. Hope everybody's having a great weekend. All right, today we're going to talk about woke capital. That's become a new term, woke capitalism. The whole idea of corporations going woke and becoming woke and taking clearly leftist positions. It's always been expected corporations would toe the line with the right. After all, it is the right that wants to lower their taxes. It is the right that supposedly wants to deregulate. But it seems that as of now, corporations are towing left and towing left significantly, and this seems to be a relatively new phenomenon of the last few years. Certainly, what we saw with Georgia, with Coca-Cola, Delta, and other companies, and the Major League Baseball. And it's an important question of why is this happening? Why are corporations suddenly towing left to the extent that they are? Because the attitude of Republicans, the Republican response to this is crucial. And so far, the Republican response to this has been, oh, if they're going to do that, we're going to teach them. We're going to teach them a lesson. We're going to break them up. We're going to regulate them more. We're going to get more engaged. We're going to do what the left does. Hey, the left has used their power, political power, to move corporations to their direction. We're going to use political power to do the same thing. So that's not going to end well. Not going to end well for corporations. Not going to end well for Republicans. Not going to end well for the right. More broadly, whatever the right is these days. So I want to talk more about that, get into more of the details about why it's happening, where this is coming from, why is the left winning is really the biggest story. Why is the left so dominant? Why does the left control basically all the institutions, with the exception of one, which we'll mention? Basically, all the institutions in our culture are now dominated by the left. So that will be the question that we'll be asking. I read a number of articles over the last few days that try to address this question. I think a lot of people are doing a lot of soul searching around this issue because, again, corporations were always believed to be Republican friendly, and we know social media is not, but we didn't expect the backlash that has happened recently and the extent of it. It's all over the place. What's going on? What is going on? What lessons can be learned from it? All right, before we get to that broader question, I want to deal with one specific example and how a couple of, I think, pretty courageous CEOs are dealing with it, and what the consequences are likely to be. We'll see. Now, I don't know how many of you are familiar with a tech company called Basecamp. It is they develop apps, a variety of different apps. I don't really know much about them. I've heard about them. They've been around for a long time. They've been around for over 20 years. It's, as far as I know, a successful company, but they've never gone public. I think they're still a private company. They're one of the first tech companies to go all virtual. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Ryan, for the support. Really appreciate that. One of the first companies, thank you, Nick. Really appreciate it. One of the first companies to go completely virtual. And they came out with an interesting announcement this week that has created a lot of stir and a lot of issues. So it turns out that there have been some pretty heated political, cultural debates, discussions at Basecamp, given that they're virtual. For $1 million, would I go skydiving one time? Yeah, for $1 million, I would do that. Yeah. So there have been some political debates, discussions, arguments, unpleasantness at Basecamp, I guess, over the last few months that have been going on chats with, on the various Basecamp online platforms, employee platforms, and then again, I think among employees through email, and HR got involved, and it's just been supposedly quite unpleasant recently. And the CEOs, the two founders, I'm not sure if these are the founders, but the two senior people at the company, they've been put under significant pressure to do something about it. So this week they came out with a statement to reflect this. And I'm not going to get into the specifics of why they're fighting. There's a big story about it, a lot of leaks, a lot of information. There's been a response from the company, from the CEOs, going back and forth about the underlying kind of issues. Sound is messed up. You guys can hear an echo? Anybody else hear messed up sound? Messed up sound? Sound is weird. Echoey, reverb. Yes, echo. All right, not sure what's going on. Let's see. That is muted. Do I have anything else? Sound is better. Maybe if I just turn down the volume a little bit. It's back to normal now. Okay. Hopefully that'll fix it. Okay. One of those internet crooks. Anyway, we're not going to go into that. I just want to go over the response. By the way, I know people are curious about the Rules for Life shows. Please, if you liked it, if you like the Rules for Life show, share it. Let's get the viewership up. That's always a good sign. That's always a good motivation to do more of them. Of course, I'll do more if I get a sponsor. That would be great. But I do plan to do more, sponsor or no sponsor. And we raised a lot of money during the show, so that was very positive. Andrew says that he really liked the show and would like to see me do more. And yes, there will be at least one more, maybe 2 or 3 more. I'm not sure. It is going to be a series, and I don't know how many rules we're going to come up with in the end, but we'll see. I'll let you know. Whoa. I think there are fireworks outside. One sec. I don't know what it is, but massive booms outside. I assume it's not explosions. I assume it's fireworks. Fireworks, okay. Fireworks outside. And you know what the reason for fireworks, we're going off topic now, but the reason for fireworks is it's May 1, and Puerto Rico, which is very union heavy and very, very much a union stronghold, is celebrating May 1st. And I don't know if you know what May 1st is, but it's basically Marxist Communist Labor Day. Marxist Communist Labor Day. So, yeah, big celebrations. There were demonstrations today all day. The unions got out into the streets. They blocked the streets here. They went out to the governor's mansion. And now you've got fireworks outside May 1st. Pretty bad. Yeah, I wish it was a Guy Fawkes. Yeah, it's not. There's no revolution going on, at least not a good one. Maybe some bad ones, but not a good one. I wish it was Happy Workers' Day. It's Happy Socialist Unionist Day. Nothing to do with happy workers. All right, back to Basecamp. So yes, I will be doing probably either Monday or Wednesday. I'll do the next show on the Iran's Rules for Life, but we will continue that as a series periodically over time. God, it's distracting. It's like they're taking out all the fireworks they had and they're launching them all at once. It's the boom, boom, booms are quite... I can't see the fireworks from my window, but I think my wife can see it from the other side of the condo. So Basecamp came out with a statement, and it's got 6 points, and basically what they're saying is we're changing corporate policy. We're completely reorienting how we're doing a bunch of different things, right? A bunch of different things. And the first one is, and I'll read this to you. The first one is, no more societal and political discussions on our company Basecamp account. So no politics at work. No cultural, political discussions, arguments, debates at work. You do whatever you want on Twitter, do whatever you want on your Facebook page, but not at work. They write, today's social and political waters are especially choppy. Sensitivities are at 11. And every discussion remotely related to politics, advocacy, or society at large quickly spins away from pleasant. You shouldn't have to wonder if staying out of it means you're complicit, or wading into it means you're a target. These are difficult enough waters to navigate in life, but significantly more so at work. It's become too much. It's a major distraction. It saps our energy and redirects our dialogue towards dark places. It's not healthy. It hasn't served us well. And we're done with it in our company Basecamp account where the work happens. People can take the conversations with willing coworkers to Signal, WhatsApp, or even a personal Basecamp account. But it can't happen where the work happens anymore. Right? So basically they're saying, at Basecamp, we're here to work, we're here to produce, we're here to create value, we're here to maximize shareholder wealth, if you will. We're here to be productive. We're here to do the work. This is distracting. This is no good. Now, there's a certain element that's tragic and sad. It's tragic and sad that we live in a world today where you cannot have disagreement about certain issues, primarily cultural issues, because people get super angry. They call each other names very quickly, and it is unbelievably disruptive and destructive to actual work environment. So it's horrible. It's not a violation of free speech, but it's horrible that we live in a world in which people cannot have, if you will, polite disagreements about politics and about culture. That the passions flare up so badly, and that the view of the other side is so vicious that people from different perspectives cannot share a workplace and have open discussions. But that is the world in which we live. I think this is driven primarily by the left, by the woke kind of culture, by the fact that you disagree with them on anything, you're a racist. You disagree with them on anything, you're a horrible, despicable human being. And therefore should be shunned and people should have nothing to do with you. They bring that kind of attitude into the workplace, and suddenly teams that have worked fantastically well, employees that have gotten along great with their bosses, suddenly can't work anymore. They can't function anymore. Because everything now is political, and your political views now dominate. And this is true primarily on the left. The left is far more passionate, far more emotional, far more vigilant with regard to their positions. I saw a study that shows that it's far more prevalent on the left to say they will never date somebody on the right than on the right saying they will never date somebody on the left. It's still prevalent on the right, but it's far more prevalent on the left. So the leftists are much more hateful of anybody on the right. And this is entering into the workplace. And I think Basecamp could have capitulated to the left, capitulated on their demands, in a sense, either to cleanse the company or to take a stand as a company in support of the leftist causes, which many companies are doing because of this passion that is brought to the forefront. Instead, what the company has done is said, no discussions, no debate, not in company time. It's not appropriate. And they admit that this is not what they would like. I'm going to read you from another blog post from one of the senior executives. We also like to tell ourselves that having these discussions with the whole company is healthy, these kind of political, cultural discussions. I used to think that too, but I no longer do. I think it's become ever more stressful, unnerving, and counterproductive. No common thread on Basecamp is going to close the gap on fundamental philosophical and political differences. And we're left worse for the wear when we try. Therefore, we're asking everyone, including Jason and me, two senior executives, to refrain from using our company Basecamp or Hey is, I guess, a platform they use, to discuss societal politics at work effective immediately. This includes everything from sharing political stories in Campfire, using message threads to elucidate others on political beliefs that go beyond the topic directly, or performing political advocacy in general. So asking people to stop talking about these questions at work, or the equivalent of at work, given that they are a virtual organization. That's pretty powerful, particularly for a company that I think prided themselves on being open, on having discussions, on having debates, and allowing employees to be open about these things. It's interesting because they add a number of other things that they're going to change the corporate culture in an effort to change the corporate culture. No more paternalistic benefits. This was interesting. For years, we've offered fitness benefits, a wellness allowance, a farmer's market share, and continuing education allowances. They felt good at the time, but we've had a change of heart. It's none of our business what you do outside of work. And it's not Basecamp's place to encourage certain behavior, regardless of intention. By providing funds for certain things, we're getting too deep into nudging people's personal individual choices. So we've ended these benefits, and as compensation, paid every employee the full cash value of the benefit for this year. In addition, we recently introduced a 10% profit-sharing plan to provide direct compensation that people can spend on whatever they'd like privately without company involvement or judgment. There's another pretty big move for a Silicon Valley technology company where they lavished employees with stuff that was very much trying to move them in particular lifestyles, in particular orientations. So also interesting. Number 3 is no more committees. For all of our 21 years existence, we were probably committee-free. No big working groups making big decisions or putting forward formalized groupthink recommendations. No bureaucracy. But recently, a few sprung up. No longer. We're turning things back over to the person or people who were distinctly hired to make those decisions. What a concept. No more committees. 4. No more lingering or dwelling on past decisions. This relates to some of the events that happened that raised all this to the surface. We've become a bit too precious with decision-making over the last few years, either by wallowing in indecisiveness, worrying ourselves into overthinking things, taking on a defensive posture and assuming the worst outcome is the likely outcome, putting too much energy into something that only needed a quick fix, inadvertently derailing projects when casual suggestions are taken as essential imperatives, or rehashing decisions in different forums or mediums. It's time to get back to making calls, explaining why once and moving on. I like these guys. No more 360 reviews for those of you who do 360 reviews at your companies. No more. Employee performance reviews used to be straightforward. A meeting with your manager or team lead, direct feedback and recommendations for improvement. Then a few years ago, we made it hard, worse, really. We introduced 360s, which required peers to provide feedback on peers. The problem is, peer feedback is often positive and reassuring, which is fun to read, but not very useful. Assigning peer surveys started to feel like assigning busy work. Manager-employee feedback should be flowing pretty freely back and forth throughout the year. No need to add performative paperwork on top of that natural interaction. So we're done with 360s too. I like these days even more. Then number 6, and the final one, no forgetting what we do here. Again, I really like this, right? We make project management, team communication, and email software. We are not a social impact company. Yes, they're not a social impact company. Our impact is contained to what we do and how we do it. We write business books, blog a ton, speak regularly. We open source software. We give back an inordinate amount of our industry given our size. And we're damn proud of it. Our work, plus that kind of giving, should occupy our full attention. We don't have to solve deep societal problems. Chime in publicly whenever the world requests our opinion on the major issues of the day, or get behind one movement or another with time or treasure. These are all important topics, but they're not our topics at work. They're not what we collectively do here. Employees are free to take up whatever cause they want, support whatever movement they'd like, and speak out on whatever horrible injustices are being perpetrated on this group or that. And unfortunately, there are far too many to choose from. But that's their business, not ours. We're in the business of making software and a few tangential things that touch that edge. We're responsible for ourselves. That's more than enough for us. That is great, guys. That is great. That is inspiring. That gives me hope that there are more people out there like this. This is in the heart of Silicon Valley. This is a cutting-edge company. And they're saying, we're in business to write software. We're not in business to comment on politics, to get involved in political action. You guys can, and we will too, as individuals, but not as a company. So give Basecamp a thumbs up. I don't know if there's any place you can do that, but give them a thumbs up because it is exciting. It is good. Somebody asked what can be done about all this political correctness. This is what needs to be done. Courageous CEOs standing up and saying that. Now, what they said was, just like a Coinbase did a few months ago when they said no more politics in our company, they said anybody who doesn't like these changes, we'll give you a very generous severance package. You can leave, no hard feelings, but we don't want you to work here if you don't agree with this, and you can leave. Now, sadly, but I think it's good for the company long term, a lot of people are leaving. I saw some estimates that maybe a third of the company is leaving the company. A third. And that many senior executives are leading, people who've been in the company for a long time, people who've developed products, people who've led, people who've been important for the company are leaving. So I'm sure this is unbelievably painful for the senior managers who decided this, who did this. It's the right decision, but often in business, in personal life, in a lot of things, this goes back to Iran's rules, right? The right decision is often a painful decision in the short run, but it's necessary to avoid even greater pain in the long run. So if you guys are software engineers, if you guys do the kind of stuff that Basecamp does. They're hiring. They are hiring. And if you're looking for employees, don't hire the people who left Basecamp. They're obviously troublemakers. They're obviously people who want to bring their particular politics, their particular view of the world, their particular view of the culture into work and impose those views on the rest of the workforce. So don't hire them. But yeah, send resumes. Basecamp is hiring. It's hiring for a bunch of different positions, it looks like, given the number of people who are leaving. It's sad that that is happening, but it is incredibly, it's incredible to see people stand up for their principles, for their values. It's incredible to see people making courageous, right, moral decisions. It's courageous to see, it's inspiring to see people standing up against the kind of woke culture creeping into their business or the political culture moving into their business and the kind of environment that creates. So it's fantastic to see that somebody, somewhere, is standing up against all this. So, good for you, managers of Basecamp. Good for you for standing up to this. I hope, and I'm sure, that long-term this is going to be good for the company. I find it hard to believe that there are not a lot of people now rushing to send resumes in because they would like to work for the company. Indeed, if you're not one of these woke leftists, this is a great opportunity to go into a culture that is probably quite healthy and quite good. The sad thing is, of course, that Basecamp is an anomaly. That Basecamp is the exception, not the rule. That it seems like in overwhelming fashion, corporation after corporation, senior managers are giving in to employee demand to be more, quote, woke, or to be more far left, to take up far left issues, to support far left issues, and to bring the weight of the corporation, whether financial, in supporting things like BLM and others, or just the moral stand of the corporation. For example, companies leaving Georgia because of the new voting rules in Georgia, which, as I've discussed in length, are not particularly bad at all. Katie, thank you. Really appreciate that. Why is so much of our culture left? Because in politics, we're kind of 50-50. Clearly, the country is split 50-50 between, let's say, Republicans and Democrats standing in for left and right. And again, I don't consider right good, left bad. I consider them both bad, but they're both different, right? And there's this question of why is left dominating? Because, again, in politics, left and right are equal. So if you look at the presidency, presidential election, all the last few presidential elections have been very close, very close. If you look at the Senate, it's 50-50. Congress is close to 50-50, and it's been swinging. The majority's been swinging back and forth between Republicans and Democrats. From an electoral perspective, right? An electoral perspective, the country is very evenly divided. And part of the question is, as Richard Hanania has a Substack newsletter. I don't know who Richard Hanania is exactly, but he wrote these really interesting posts that I found really interesting. And the title of one of them, the first one, is, why is everything liberal? Liberal here being left. Why is everything left? Because everything is left in terms of our institutions. All our institutions are left. We know that our universities are left. Our schools and our curriculum is left. most of our cultural institutions, certainly in the arts, are left. They're more leftist think tanks in a sense of they're bigger. Right? And if you count the environmentalist movement, much more. The activist networks, far, far bigger on the left than on the right. If you look at the environmentalist movement and its dominance. But even if you look at the Me Too and how big that was relative to anything the right has ever done, or if you look at BLM and the demonstrations last summer, they were massive, massive. And those who clearly had a left-wing agenda, and anybody who did any research into, I think, BLM would have discovered how extremely left they were. All these institutions, one after one, have been, over the last, you could argue, 50 years, 100 years, have been moving to the left. Have been not just moving to the left, have become dominated by the left. Right? And finally, it seems like, in the last few years, that it's tilted so far that the last institution that people had thought was still on the, quote, right, business, seems to have drifted completely to the left, whether it's Silicon Valley, social media, Amazon, or Delta, Coca-Cola, and many, many other companies that came out. American Express, I think, came out with support for BLM, and now with support to the kind of Democrats' agenda around Georgia, and on and on and on and on. What is it that has allowed all these institutions to dramatically shift leftwards? Why is it that the left dominates all of our institutions? I forgot a crucial institution that the left dominates, and that's media, newspapers, media. Mainstream media is dominantly left. It's not a shock to anybody out there, right? So what is it about the world that makes this possible, even though you could argue, the data shows in elections, that it's 50-50 when it comes to actually voting. So Hanania posits that the difference is this, that the right settles for voting. They're very good at bringing out the vote. People are passionate about the politics. They vote their side, and then they go back to work and forget about it. That generally on the right, there's less enthusiasm, less passion, maybe less interest, less activism, less engagement than there is on the left. And to change institutions, you need passion, you need activism, you need the numbers engaged. You need people really, really engaged. And he presents a bunch of statistics, which I found fascinating. Now, I don't think he deals with the fundamental reason, and I'll get to the fundamental reason why the left has more activists, has more passion, has more people interested, and can overtake the culture, even business, even though it only has 50% of the vote. It can do all that. I think he misses the fundamental reason for that. But he provides these amazing statistics about the fact that over the last few elections, particularly on the presidential side, Democrats have way raised more money in every single battleground state than Republicans on the presidential side. So Clinton raised more money than Trump. Biden raised more money than Trump. And Obama raised more money than McCain or Romney. by big margins. And it's not that a few people wrote big checks, because at the personal level, you can only write a check for $2,500 max. So the number of donors is significantly higher. I mean, not a little bit higher, significantly higher to Democrats. That was true with Obama. It was true with Clinton, even though she lost. Money doesn't gain you a win, but it tells you something about how passionate people are about their candidate. So, people, Democrats, are not only willing to go vote, but they're willing to actually financially support their candidate. Republicans are not. Now, it turns out that if you look at all politics, if you look at House, Senate, and the presidency, then what you find is that Republicans and Democrats overall, even though Democrats have an edge in presidential, overall were pretty equal until 2016. And in 2016 and since 2016, this was also the case in 2008, but certainly since 2016, really since 2014, since the midterms but starting in 2016, Democrats way raised more money than Republicans across the board. Again, doesn't guarantee victory, as we've seen, but it says something about the enthusiasm of their support. Democrats are far more enthusiastic about supporting their cause than Republicans are, than the right is. If you look at demonstrations, public events in support of particular issues, Democrats have a far bigger edge over Republicans. Some of the biggest Republican events have been March for Life, anti-abortion, Tea Party in 2009, what's his name? Glenn Beck had a big event in, I think, 2010. And yet all of those dwarfed by the rallies that the left produces, which are far bigger, bring out far more people, and are far more substantial. And this, again, has been true for a long time since we have data. But suddenly, over the last 10, 12 years, this has been growing dramatically, the gap between that. The left is more engaged, more in the streets, more motivated, more passionate, more out there to change the world. The left wants to change the world. And the right is like pretty much okay with the world as it is, and they go and they vote, and the rest of the time they're not engaged. I mean, this is what the numbers show. Certainly there are people on the right who are very engaged. Some of them are here on the chat. But the big numbers show lack of engagement. Think about the fact that people on the left go into professions knowing they're giving up a lot of money because they're passionate about changing the world. So, for example, leftists go into academia. It's not just that academia shapes them into leftists. It's that people with a leftist orientation tend to go into academia. Now, they tend to be high IQ people, high IQ in a sense of a very loose proxy for intelligence. They could get high-paying jobs elsewhere. But they choose not to. They choose to go into academia. One reason for that is that it's a way for them to have an impact on the world, to change the world. They're more interested in having cultural impact. Another profession dominated by the left is journalism. Now, it's true that they are indoctrinated, in a sense, in leftist ideology at university. But then many of them choose to go into journalism, and the conservative kids don't. What do the conservative kids do? They tend to go into business. And the leftist kids go into journalism. They're willing to give up income. Journalism is not a lucrative profession, particularly not on the left. It's much more lucrative on the right. So on the right, there's a shortage of journalists. So Fox has a shortage. CNN has a surplus. Again, because the left is more... So Joe Cow says they can't even write honest, non-biased articles. Neither one can, left or right. But the point is that there is work on the right and not enough people to fill it because they're not interested. There's no passion. They're not motivated by changing the world. They're not excited about getting involved, going to protests, writing a check, even though they tend to be just as wealthy as Democrats, writing a check to their candidates. By the way, there's no correlation between income and whether you vote Democratic or Republican. Equal number of rich people vote Democratic as do Republican. In almost every group, it's equal. And the country generally is 50-50. But the left is more passionate. The left is more intellectual. The left is more about changing the world. The left is more engaged, more active. And this is not an opinion. This is what the numbers show. And these are fascinating articles. You can find them. One is called Why Companies Are Becoming More Left-Wing. Right? This one has a different hypothesis. Right? But it's... One is called, let's see, the one that's interesting, Why Everything is Liberal by Daniel Hanania. And the other one is 2016, The Turning Point by Richard Hanania, not Daniel Hanania, Richard Hanania. And one of the things Hanania says is this gap of enthusiasm, this gap in terms of activism, this gap, oh, by the way, even petition signing. More people on the left sign petitions than on the right. Something as easy as signing a petition. And therefore, the left's agenda gets passed. The left's agenda gets legislated. And the left's agenda starts to dominate. Everywhere. Everywhere. And Hanania documents the fact that this is intensified under Trump. So Trump could get out voters. He didn't get out activists. But the left, in response to Trump, got out huge numbers of activists. So the difference is, because the income is about the same between left and right across almost every income stream, Republicans do, though, tend to be much more focused on family, on having a family, and having kids. They're much more focused on their job. They tend to put their head down and do their work. Democrats do their work because they're often very successful at work. But they also tend to be activists at the same time. All right, I deleted one of your comments. Sorry, Frank, I deleted a comment by accident, and I don't know how to put it back, so I apologize. So Hanania says, and this is a starting point, which is interesting, but it's not really giving us a root cause. He says, it's an issue of energy. It's an issue of activism. It's an issue of caring. It's an issue of motivation. The left is motivated, the right is not. The left is motivated, the right is not. Now, Brian Kaplan, who comments on some of this, who's an economist who has a lot of interesting views, but I warn you, he's pro-immigration, so some of you guys might not like him, but he's a really interesting guy. He says one of the, what would you expect? What would you expect to happen? Let's say if companies all turned left, if all these company leaders turned the companies left, there is a market opportunity here because you'd have a bunch of these disgruntled employees who don't want to work for explicitly leftist organizations, who would want to start their own companies and just have people on the right in them. And you'd have companies of the left and companies of the right, and they would be completely separate. Right? And why is that not happening? And he says, well, it's not happening because of discrimination laws, that you could get sued. If I said, I only want Republicans in my company, I'd never do that, by the way, but let's say you did that. I only want Republicans. You can't do that. There's discrimination law that prohibits that. So part of the problem is the market can't solve this problem. The market cannot solve this problem. All right, so the question is still there. Why is it that the left dominates academia? Why is it that the left dominates enthusiasm? That it dominates activism? That it dominates even political contributions? Why is it that the left is so much more engaged than the right? And that the right just settles? That the right just easily compromises? That the right just goes along? That they go and vote, but other than that, they're not engaged in politics at all? At all. So before I give you my answer to that, I want to remind you to like the show because we're way down on the thumbs up on the show. We're way low. Because somebody came in with a thumb down. I wonder what they didn't like about what I've said so far. But hopefully we'll get a few more thumbs up. Should be well over 100 by now. Let me also remind you to share the shows, particularly short videos that Action Jackson produces. That would be great. And of course, I'll be going to Super Chat in a few minutes. And you can have priority in the Super Chat because we've had very few $20 questions. You can have a priority in the Super Chat by submitting a $20 or more question. And as Alejandrina has emphasized to you guys, the goal of every show is to get to $400 in Super Chat contributions. Today is May 1, so in celebration of Communist Labor Day, make your support to the defenders of capitalism on here and snub the commies out there. Yes, any support is greatly appreciated, and of course you can support the show on a monthly basis, on a regular basis. If you don't listen to it live and you can't do the Super Chat, or if you just don't want to do the Super Chat, the best way to support the show is monthly through PayPal. You can do that on YaronBrookShow.com/support. You can do it on Patreon, and you can do it on Subscribestar or on Locals. So you can go on any of those platforms and support the show with a regular contribution monthly. It is greatly appreciated. It's value for value. It's just like the amount of money going to politicians at elections and the number of people sending the money shows the level of enthusiasm for that particular politician. Well, the amount of money you guys send me, particularly on a monthly basis, shows the level of enthusiasm that is out there you have towards what I am producing. So if you like what I produce, if you get value from what I produce, the way to reflect that is by going over to support the show at YaronBrookShow.com/support. You can do it at $2. You can do it at any amount. Oh, we're up to 4 thumbs down. I haven't said anything controversial or that was not factual, and yet the haters are out there. The haters are out there, and they don't stop. Why? Because I haven't praised Republicans to the hilt, I guess? Probably. It's probably that I haven't praised Republicans to the hilt. All right. So why is this enthusiasm gap exists? Well, it's because, at least for now, the Democrats, the left, not so much the Democrats, but the left, actually presents a vision of a kind of world they want. It's a terrible vision. It's an immoral vision. It's an ugly vision. But it's a vision. They present a vision of justice. We know, some of us at least, know what they present is unjust. It's wrong. It's immoral. But they present it in the language of justice. And they present it with passion. The left is very, very, very good at leveraging the moral code that pretty much everybody in the culture has, believes in. Altruism. That your purpose in life is to live for the sake of others. Into a political agenda. Sacrifice. Feel guilty, they tell us. For what? For nature. The environment. Temperature. The weather. Feel guilty. Sacrifice. For what? For people who don't have anything. For people who need stuff. For children who, I don't know, are poor. For minorities who are being oppressed and certainly were oppressed in the past. For any cause out there, you can join us and fight for justice. Fight for the meek. Fight for those who don't have any. Don't be a pragmatist. Don't just side with business. And we know markets have failed, they tell us. But we have this idea, socialism, it can work really, really well. The fact that it hasn't worked anywhere else doesn't mean anything. They just got it wrong. We can make it work right. We have a new vision. We have it better. But there's a cause higher than yourself. And it's a beautiful cause. It's a just cause. It's a cause where racism is eradicated. It's a cause where inequality is eradicated. It's a cause where injustice is eradicated. It's a cause where everybody is free. Now we know it's all, those of you who listen to your own book show know that's all nonsense. But they inspire. They inspire. They project. And this is the Marxists are the best at this, because the Marxists actually present a utopia. They actually present an ideal that they believe in. I think the BLM types, and generally the nihilists out there, have a much harder time doing this. But they're fighting for something. And that attracts young people. It gets young people excited. It gets young people a sense that there's purpose in their life. It gives them a sense that they're fighting for something. It gives them a sense that they're focused on the future. And it gets them motivated. And it gets them engaged in the fight. And it presents it as valuable to be world changers, fighting for a better world, because that involves sacrifice of salary to become a journalist, of salary to become that's fine. And by the way, we can dangle some power over other people before you. So you can, if we're successful, some of you can have a lot of power over other people. So they attract the power lusters on top of it all. But it's not an appeal to emotion. Emotion is part of it. But the emotion is the result of the appeal to ethics, to morality, to justice, to values, an appeal for a better world. What does the right do? It agrees with the altruism. It can't challenge that. Can't challenge the altruism. It can't challenge the idea that your life belongs to the group and you should sacrifice to them. The illogic of altruism that Ayn Rand presented to the right and to the world 60 years ago. Nobody's learned. Nobody cares. How does the right even define itself in the world we live in today? The right defines itself primarily by one characteristic: the anti-left. There is no vision. There is no something they want great that they want to achieve. They don't believe in free markets. They certainly don't advocate for that. They don't believe in individualism and individual freedom. They're against abortion. They're pro-family, but they're not too pro-family, right? I mean, how many times was Trump divorced, right? It doesn't matter that much to them. They're kind of pro-religion, but we live in a world in which you don't advocate too harshly for religions. They can't do that too much. And on the fundamental issue of altruism, again, they agree with the left. They have no utopia. They've given up on the Founding Fathers. They've given up on America of the Founding Fathers. Joe says they're about God, family, and guns. Yes, they get passionate about guns. They get passionate about abortion. And they get passionate about Trump, about a person. But there's no vision. There's no model. There are no values. There has nothing to excite young people. Nothing to present them with an ideal. Nothing to excite them about what they should fight for. What values they should engage with. Nothing. Instead, there's emptiness. There's no agenda. Remember that in 2020, the Republican Party didn't even have positions on anything. You know, what you do in the convention. I forget the name of it. But anyway, they didn't write up anything. Because even on policy, their primary agenda item is we're anti-left. We're not for anything. I mean, we're for personality. Right? The right is impotent. And Ayn Rand, by the way, said this in the late 1960s. The right was bankrupt. The conservatives were bankrupt. They stood for nothing. Religion, some version of family, guns, God. They're uninspiring. Their solution to the dominance of the left in our businesses is to break up businesses. So that the broken up businesses will have, you know, a lot of leftist small businesses instead of one big leftist big business. Their solution to the left's dominance of our institutions is statism. They become statists. That's how they want to solve the problem of statism. They want to fight the left by adopting the left's ideology on everything but cultural issues. We're going to talk about that, about that tomorrow. So the reason the left wins, the reason the left dominates, is because the left is more consistent across its ideology. The left is more intellectual. Therefore, they go into intellectual pursuits like academia. The left truly wants to change the world, whereas conservatives just want to conserve what is. They're not about change. It's because the left has the moral high ground on almost every issue. Because everybody agrees on altruism. The difference is that the left is consistent and the right is inconsistent about their altruism. So what do? Nothing with the left and the right as they exist today. Nothing. You're going to have no impact if you bury yourself in one of those camps. What we must do is provide a vision, provide an ideal, provide a solution to socialism and critical race theory and God, guns, country, flag, all of that, and religion. Provide a vision of a true ideal place. Resurrect the founding fathers and embrace them. We need to destroy altruism as an ideology, destroy collectivism as an ideology, destroy statism as an ideology. We need to be advocates for the individual, for individual freedom, and therefore for capitalism, uncompromising advocates for capitalism. We need to abandon both the left and the right as they exist today and embrace the political spectrum, which places the left and the right on the collectivist side, and us, the few of us, however few they land up being, as standing for individualism and reason, as standing with the Enlightenment. And we're going to be small, because most people over there on the left and the right. But we need to match the left's passion, match the left's involvement, match the left's willingness and eagerness and excitement to change the world. We need to embrace those who stand for individualism and stand for reason. Whether they came from the left, came from the right, come from anywhere. That's the only solution to the issue we have today. You know, Basecamp solution, to be silent, to not allow political discourse, not to allow people have their engagement, is the right solution for right now. But it doesn't change the world. To change the world, you have to offer an alternative. A philosophical alternative, an ideological alternative, an alternative vision, an alternative set of values. And at this point, only objectivism has that. Only objectivism has that. And when objectivists get too involved with right or left, they dilute that message. They make it seem like we're just like everybody else. We have got to be uncompromising, particularly given how small we are, particularly how few we are. We've got to be uncompromising in how we present our views. We've got to be uncompromising in how we fight the battle. We've got to be uncompromising in our values, in our ethics, and in our politics. We've got to be the true alternative to what is going on there, out there in the world. Because left and right are not presenting an alternative. It's just same old, same old. All right. So corporations have gone woke because the left is more consistently philosophical, because the left is more consistently altruistic, because the left is more inspiring of altruists, because the left is more inspiring of collectivists, and the right is just, It buys the collectivism, it buys into the altruism, and it has no inspiration. And of course, the left inspires people to get involved. The left makes it a moral imperative to be involved, to be active. It's an issue of justice. And the consequence of that are leftist employees get involved. Leftist employees raise their voice. Leftist employees make make their views known in the company and shift the corporate culture. And the people on the right are quiet because they don't have the moral backbone. They don't have the moral standing. They don't know how to fight the left because on a very, very fundamental level, they don't disagree with the left. We don't need to be more like the left. That's what the Republicans are. They're just Me Too of the left. What we need to be is radically different from the left. Radically different from the left. And that's what the right has not been. Again, because they bought into their altruism and they bought into their collectivism. We need radical individualism and radical support for reason. That's when we can challenge both left and right. That's where we can win. All right, we've got some super chat questions. I encourage you to do more. We're like halfway to our goal of $400. We're about 210, so another 190 needed. We try to make 400 every show to kind of keep the pace. So feel free to do it here. Of course, if you're listening on speaker, or if you're listening on one of the podcasting apps, or if you're watching on YouTube, not the live show, you can support the show on YaronBrookShow.com/support, on Patreon, or on Subscribestar. And of course, I really, really appreciate your support for the values that I'm fighting for. So here's question number one. And I'm starting with the 20 and above first, and then we'll go backwards. Probably one reason there is left tendency is because they focus on clear concretes to justify their white positions. Floyd for racism, poor disabled for Social Security, while the right focuses on gay wedding cakes and AK-47s. Yeah, but notice that what the left does is it's got one theme: altruism. The suffering deserve, the meek shall inherit the earth. And then they constantly fight in concretes to fill it in. But the right has no concretes, because yes, the right can say gay wedding cakes. They can make a big case out of gay wedding cakes, and they gain some points on the gay wedding cake issue. But then they complain about Twitter. So the baker can have personal political views and discriminate against people based on the personal political views, but Twitter can't. Corporations can't. They cannot be consistent because they don't have a consistent moral framework. The left has a consistent moral framework: altruism. And you just have to break it up into its different segments. And the right, as I said before, shares that. So yes, the concretes of the left are more inspiring. They're more visceral because they're more consistent. They're more consistently altruistic. Again, altruism meaning purpose of your life is to serve others. Others' needs are moral claim against your life. And therefore, when the government takes stuff from you, to give to them, that's okay, because morality dictated you needed to give it to them anyway. Oh, super chat questions flowing in. This is good. But I'm gonna keep it with the yeah. Oops. All right. So that is that question. I've heard that NFL players risk concussions and possibly long-term brain damage when they play. Should a player take this risk, since the brain is the most important organ? I don't think so, but I also think that the sport is not doing enough to protect them. There are ways to protect their brains. The current helmets don't do that. There are better helmets. They might look funnier. They might look, less manly. But there are ways to make the sport less dangerous, particularly with regard to head injuries. And the fact that the sport is not willing to do that is what has turned me off of football. It's what's turned me, I barely ever watch football because of that. So I wouldn't want to play football given the risk of brain injury. And I would encourage people not to do it. And I don't like watching people play football, given the kind of injuries they get. It's just not, every time that quarterback hits the ground, even though he gets up, no concussion, you know that has had a little bit of a damaging impact on his brain, if you read the literature. And that's just horrible to think about it. And it's not, it takes all the fun out of it. Right? Why do you think there is a labor shortage in the U.S. currently? Restaurants and service industries are struggling to hire. I mean, two reasons there's a labor shortage right now. One is that Congress, under Trump and then under Biden, have continually increased unemployment benefits to levels which for some employees, it's just not worth going back to work because they get more in unemployment benefits. And they're just going to wait until the unemployment benefits run out. They keep extending it. They keep expanding it. And so they're not going to go in the job market until that happens. So that's one reason. The second is that there was already a shortage in workers before COVID because of restrictions on immigration. Our economy, particularly when it's doing well, when it is creating jobs as the economy should, needs large numbers of immigrants. And they don't just need large numbers of well-educated, high earners. They need all kinds of immigrants. They need all kinds of workers. And under Trump and now under Biden, immigration is restricted significantly. Legal immigration is restricted significantly. Illegal immigration is the way immigrants come into this country to do the kind of low-income jobs because they're not going to get sponsored through an H-1 to come in and wash dishes or be waiters. So until we legalize immigration, which is the solution to illegal immigration, it's to legalize them. That's fine. So right now, too many people are waiting on the sidelines and taking government handouts. And when the government handouts stop, they'll get back looking for jobs. And we don't allow the immigrants in. We're restricting them. So as a consequence, you have a labor shortage. And it's not good for the economy. And it depresses economic activity, it depresses wealth creation, and it encourages companies to go overseas. Visa overstays do wash dishes. I know a lot of visa overstays, what they do is the people, well, I shouldn't say this because then you'll send ICE on them, but the people who sell you the stuff in the malls, in those little carts in the malls, they're selling little things. All of those are overstay visa illegal workers, right? They just are. And to the extent that is enforced, that has enforced more, to that extent you have fewer of those people. But there's no question visa overstays wash dishes. I know people who've washed dishes as a visa overstayer. Most people who come to this country illegally from Europe or from Israel, places like that, overstay their visas and get odds and edge jobs as they travel across the country before they go back, if they go back. Let's see. Today is Derby Day. I don't know what Derby Day is. 51,000 people went out for fun and greed. The Louisville airport is packed with private jets, and the whole city is a party tonight. That is how you thumb your nose at the commies. Good for them. Excellent. Thank you, Bree. Yes, go have fun. That's the way to thumb your nose generally at commies. Have you read Lavasevsky, a Polish scientist during Soviet occupation, studied the genesis of evil in politics? They concluded cluster B personality disorder, ideologues who could not understand human nature and consequences. No, I haven't read him. But no, look, everybody tries to escape the fact that ideas have consequences. Good ideas lead to good things, and bad ideas lead to evil things. And people embrace ideas for a variety of different reasons. Sometimes it's because those are the only ideas they've been exposed to. But the idea that people are born evil because they have a certain personality disorder that they're born into is way too of a deterministic factor. It's just not true. Bad ideas lead to evil actions. I shouldn't even comment on this, but I'll just say, I have never, ever said Israel needs a wall. Indeed, I'm against the wall. I think the wall is not good for Israel. I've never been in support of a wall. I've said why I think the Israeli wall is different than the American wall. The Israeli wall is it's pretending to protect Israelis from terrorists, from people who would literally kill them. And the American wall is supposed to protect Americans from workers competing with them. I think those two are fundamentally different. But I oppose both walls. I do. I think there are much better ways to win the war in Israel than to build a wall. I've never defended the wall. You find me the quotes, full context, where I say everything. Not just pointing out the differences between them, where I explain it. You got to defeat the Palestinians, then you don't need a wall. And the wall doesn't help. There's still terrorist attacks in spite of the wall. So, give me a break. Yeah, you should keep the timestamps and you should actually listen, Ken, but you don't because you misrepresent my views all the time. All the time. So this isn't an exception. This is the rule. On issues where you disagree, you misrepresent. That's the tactic. But no, I've been Israel winning, defeating its opponents, and thus not needing a wall. A wall is a sign of defeat. I've always said that in Israel and in the U.S. But I also said that comparing the wall in Israel to the wall in the United States is absurd and dishonest. Because terrorists are not coming across the border with Mexico. Mexicans are, and they're not terrorists. Actually, it's Guatemalans and Nicaraguans. All right, so I haven't read Lubasowski, and I don't think I agree with that approach, if I understood it correctly from your short thing. Of course, I can't judge the man because I haven't really read it. I've never made a case for a wall, any wall. I don't believe in it. I made a case that the walls are different, and Israel's more justified than America, but I don't justify Israel doing it. And I've said that in Israel, and I've said that many times on this show. I still have emotional remnants of altruism from my Christian-influenced upbringing. Do you have any tips in dealing with others when making moral decisions openly so as not to come across as a psychopathic monster? Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I don't know why in dealing with others you should come across as such a monster. I mean, you should be respectful and nice generally, and positive and friendly, and don't come across as an obnoxious objectivist. But you need to tell them, I'm not going to do this because I don't think it's in my interest to do it, and I'm really focused on my interest, and I think that's a sacrifice, and I'm not willing to commit that sacrifice if it comes to that. And that's just the way you have to present your morality. This is what I think is just and right. I'm doing what I think is just and right. Don't try not to come across as a pragmatist. I'm doing this because I think it works right now. No, because I think long term this isn't good for me and it isn't good for you. And I'm acting in my long-term self-interest, and I don't see any reason to do X. But you got to be a decent human being. What did you think Governor DeSantis' ideological stand on CRT? He said it's Marxist dung as applied to race, and people should be treated as individuals, not groups, no taxpayer money for CRT in schools. I think that's great. I think it's good to see politicians stand up to it. I wish, he was consistently an individualist. I wish he was consistently an individualist. I fear he is not. But in some things, he's very good. And in CRT and in this, he is very good. Right. By the way, I know I owe a movie review of The Secretary. I still haven't watched the movie. I will. I promise to do it in May. Hopefully in the next couple of weeks, I will do it and get back to you with a movie review of it. All right, we are at... We're about $100 short, so $115 short. So if anybody wants to get us there quickly, that would be great, so that we can reach our goal of $400. Let me see. All right, I think we've done all the $20 questions. There was some issue that just came up in Florida. Let me see if I can just find it, that I thought was pretty bad. Yeah. So Florida's House and Senate, and I assume DeSantis is going to sign this, just passed a law that fines social media for banning politicians. Banning politicians. So stuff like that is scary. That's a violation of the free speech of Twitter and why politicians? What's so special about politicians? Politicians are our servants, not our lords, but that is our lords. And that's the kind of stuff I worry about with DeSantis. He's got this collectivist, central planner, we are your masters attitude that I think is not good. All right, we're getting some bunch of $5 questions, so I'm just going to copy them over and start taking the non-$20 questions. What did you mean when you said on Lex that Eastern European Jews are very Christian? Eastern European Jews, in order to survive, particularly the more secular ones, I think adopted many ideas from Christianity. They embraced the idea of guilt, in some sense, a kind of original sin, but Jewish guilt is very similar to Catholic guilt, and there's no real guilt in the Old Testament, so I think they adopted that. I think they adopted many habits associated with altruism and collectivism and socialism that they adopted from their neighbors in an effort to assimilate, in an effort to become like their neighbors. And that's what I meant when I said Eastern European Jews are very Christian. I think that's true of Western European Jews as well. I'll give you one example. So the reason Jews are monogamous, because there's no monogamy in the Old Testament. There's no monogamy in Judaism. and I'm not defending non-monogamy, but this is just a fact, right? Is because they wanted to fit in Europe. So in Europe, a great rabbi, whatever great means, 700 years ago, 720 years ago, I think, declared the Jews should be monogamous for 700 years in order to fit in in the Christian countries, right? And that's why they're monogamous, right? So it's not, it's in order to fit in, not for any other reason, right? And there are a lot of aspects of modern Jewry or secular Jewry that have more to do with Christianity than there is with Judaism as a religion. But of course, I'm not Jewish in a religious sense either. If we're moving more towards authoritarianism, why are police departments across the country being neutered? De Blasio just released half the inmates on Rikers Island. Well, because this is here's my explanation. I keep explaining it, but maybe if I do it in different terms with different questions, you guys will get more clarity over it. We're heading towards authoritarianism, but part of the way in which we head towards authoritarianism, right, is there's going to be this. So, for example, the left is very authoritarian when it comes to economic policy, when it comes to towing the line in terms of critical race theory or what words you use and how you speak, free speech and stuff they want to curtail. They're very authoritarian. But when it comes to crime, for now, they want everybody released. They have this Rousseau view that crime is a result of bad civilization. It's not bad choices people make. It's systemic racism causes crime, right? Frank, thank you. That is very generous, and I'll get to you. And Jeff, thank you. We're getting very close to 400 because of Frank and Jeff and everybody else who's contributed tonight. But this is the path we're going to take towards authoritarianism. As there's more anarchy, there's more nihilism, there's more crime. And what the left is basically bringing about is more crime. There will be a greater and greater demand for law and order because of the riots, the increased crime rates, and everything else. There'll be an ever-growing demand for greater and more police and more militarized police and law and order. And that law and order platform will be part of what, as a response to this nihilism, will be the ultimate authoritarianism, right? So authoritarianism doesn't come all at once, and it doesn't affect every aspect of life all at once. It comes in stages, and it often comes as a response to some perceived breakdown of civilization. So Americans won't just embrace authoritarianism. They'll only embrace authoritarianism as a cure to something which they view as worse. Mayhem in the streets. Complete disintegration of society. The kind of stuff we saw last summer, but on an even greater scale with no response. That is likely to bring about, over time, it won't happen all at once, authoritarianism. But in the meantime, government is growing. Government is embracing the role of getting into our lives in more areas, in more places, in more ways. Zcash, you mean like NSA and its spying after 9/11? Yeah, and it's still spying. It hasn't stopped. They continue to approve the NSA continuing to spy even more and more and more. Nobody's stopping that, not Republicans or Democrats. As they use a crisis in order to increase their power. And the fact that prisoners are being released from jail is going to increase crime, going to increase mayhem, and it can provide the next stage of authoritarianism of an excuse to take over even more control, even more power. All right, another question. I thought about Hoffman Kant. Evolution should refine our senses over the millennia to be fine-tuned to reality. This is the survival value. This is a value for survival. We must know reality via senses. Survival demands it. Thoughts. Absolutely. Absolutely. Right. Now, we have to know reality up to a particular level of refinement, of accuracy, right? So, for example, we don't have a bat's sense of ability to picture reality through radar, and it sees things probably in the world out there that our eyes don't see because radar might be sensitive to certain things, like in the dark. So we haven't evolved to have senses that observe reality fully through sight in the dark, and we don't have an alternative like radar, like bats do. So we've evolved senses to know reality with enough refinement and with enough of the capabilities to survive and to thrive. And then the beauty is that based on that, we can then use our mind, our reasoning, experimentation, theorizing and testing and experiments to then know aspects of reality that we cannot observe directly. You cannot see atoms, but we know atoms exist. Because the things we can see allow us to do, and the fact that they're accurate, the fact that they reflect reality, allow us then to understand those aspects of reality that we don't see. For example, we can develop night vision goggles, right? Whether it's infrared or other forms of night vision technologies that allow us to see in the dark, even though evolution didn't provide us with a direct tool to see reality in the dark. Because we are seeing reality, because we know what we're supposed to see, we can design a technology that can allow us to see now under conditions that evolution did not allow us to. Thank you, Brian. Brian has just taken us over $400. Really, really appreciate the support. Thanks, guys. I mean, it's great that we are meeting the goal of $400 a show, almost every show these days. And it's a testament to Alejandrina, who's doing a great job urging you on, and it's a testament to your support of the show. And it inspires me, so thank you. And it's why I'm going to do lots of shows like Yaron's Rules for Life, even though it has smaller viewership, because you guys are supporting them. So I'm going to continue doing them. All right. I recently watched The Founder, and while Ray Kroc was a visionary and an innovator, he was also dishonest and deceptive at times. How do you regard someone like that? Exactly that way. I think you have to say he was an amazing visionary and inventor, and that to some extent he undermined his moral character, and he undermined his own happiness, because at times he was deceptive. Now, that's just a reality. Now, if the movie is accurate, if that's the way it is, I mean, I don't know. I judge Ray Kroc primarily positively because of what he achieved and what he succeeded doing, and because the evidence is overwhelming that for the overwhelming majority of his decisions and he was not dishonest. He was an honest person. There might have been some dishonesty there, and that's sad that happened, and morally that is condemnable. Right? And the fact that you die rich does not mean you died happy, and happiness is the measure of successful life, not richness. Would you interview Victor Davis Hanson? It depended on the topic and why I was interviewing him. So certainly, 18 years ago I would have interviewed him. And indeed, I did a panel with Victor Davis Hanson at Berkeley University. Yes, at Berkeley. It was Victor Davis Hanson, myself, and Daniel Pipes. And, Hanson in those days, the main topic was foreign policy and 9/11 and everything that happened. And on that, we shared a lot. There's a lot in common, and I really admired his work. I still admire his work in military history and what he had to say about military history. Unfortunately, primarily in the Trump era, but even a little bit before Trump, Victor Davis Hanson, I think, his writings became very anti-immigration I think in an irrational way. And he became very pro-Trump, again, and I think in an irrational way. So I've lost some of my respect for him. But in terms of military historian, he's one of the best. And if I was doing a program, a show about that, then yeah, he would be one of the people at the top of the list in terms of talking about too, but not on a broad topics. I would debate him, but I wouldn't just interview him. You said you've contributed to some of the rational right. Who are a few examples? I'm contributing on these Substacks. Let me see if I can pull a few that I find. I don't know if they're rational right or rational. I generally think they're rational. They're not objectivist. They're not consistently good, but they're good. But they're much better than the rest of the culture. And I think, supporting them on Substack. And who are they? Something called Persuasion, which I think is more tilt left a little bit. Persuasion, which is Yashka Monk, who I think is Russian in origin. Let's see who else is on my list here. For the right, my main source is, oh God. I hate it when my mind goes blank at important points. The Dispatch. The Dispatch has good writers. It has a good summary of the news. It does some really valuable fact-checking. So I give a little bit of money to the Dispatch as part of, in order to be on their mailing list, in order to do their Substack. I'm trying to think who else. There are a few others. I'll try to get a list together of the people I give. I don't know even if I give money to, but I certainly subscribe to their Substacks, even if I don't give them money. Some of their Substacks are free. All right, let's see. Are you watching the Food That Built America on History Channel? No, I'm not. It's about entrepreneurs and their vision. Young people need to see this, learn from it. That sounds great. That sounds exciting. The Food That Built America is about food entrepreneurs, I guess. Food entrepreneurs. Does success in the corporate world necessarily entail rising up to manager level position, or is it legitimate to desire to remain at the level of individual contributor for one's entire career by being a technical expert in some area? I think it's fine. As long as the career is such that you're constantly developing new skills, new abilities, you're challenging yourself, you're pushing yourself, you're doing things that are interesting and challenging. So as long as you're not just settling, as long as you're really, pushing yourself and maximizing your potential and taking your job as a real career, yeah. I mean, you don't have to go up corporate ladder to do that. There are lots of different ways in which you can do that. Thanks, Alejandra. Iran is the antidote to the hurt, altruism, angry access of modern leftism, and appeal to logical individualism. Thanks. Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that. Oh, no, that's a question. Whoops. I didn't see the question mark. Okay. Iran, comma. You got to put commas in. It's important. Is the antidote to the hurt, altruism, angry access of modern leftism, an appeal to logical individualism? Yes. It's an appeal to reason and individualism, because there's only one kind of logic. But yes, logical individualism or reason and individualism. Rational individualism, rational egoism, rational self-interest. That is the only antidote, and that should be the appeal. All right, last question. The Atlas Shrugged movies were horrible. Yes, they were horrible. Do you think it would be better as a mini-series? Maybe by Jon Favreau. I don't know if Jon Favreau. I don't know. Yeah, it would definitely be better as a miniseries. But remember, these were 3 movies. So it's a little bit like a miniseries could be bad. So it's not the format that's the problem. It's the execution and the vision of the project, which was a problem with the 3 movies, Atlas Shrugged movies. What you need is a great script, and you need great execution from director to cinematography to acting, none of which you had in the first movie. So you need a great script, and look, Atlas Shrugged is maybe the greatest novel ever written. To produce it into a movie, you can't do that with mediocrities. You can't do that with just average. You need giants. You need the best directors. And no, it can't be people who do comic books. Sorry, superhero movies are not the standard, I don't think. I want to see somebody who does serious drama, who does it well, do the Atlas Shrugged movies. And I don't know who that would be. Or somebody yet to be discovered who's just got extraordinary talent and knows how to put it together. All right. Thanks, guys. Really appreciate the support. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being supportive of the Yaron Brook Show. Thank you for all of those who support us monthly. Thank you to all of those who support us through Super Chat. Don't forget to like the show before you leave. Don't forget to share the show when you have an opportunity, and so on. The last question just came in, the kind of question I hate. Thoughts on Craig Biddle's interview in Prager University? I didn't have a huge problem with Craig doing an interview with Prager. I wish he had been sharper, made clear the sharp differences between religion and objectivism. For example, when I didn't see the whole interview. I saw bits and pieces of it. I don't like Craig for a variety of reasons, so I didn't really watch it carefully. So I skimmed the interview. But for example, when Prager says something like, "Oh, all these atheists killed millions of people in World War II," or whatever, communism, fascism, whatever, not to make the point that religion, in particular Christianity, have killed at least as many people through history on religious wars. Not to make the point that communism and fascism are not really atheistic in the sense of based on reason, is I think terrible. Vikram, thank you. That is very, very generous. Really appreciate that. I don't know what currency that is, but I think Alejandrina has converted it already. So thank you. So I wasn't very impressed. I thought it was too weak, wishy-washy. And also the idea that we're allies in liberty. We're not allies in liberty with Prager. I mean, I'm fine with doing an interview and doing a kind of a debate with somebody, but then you have to make clear that you don't agree. That you don't agree about liberty. Prager's view of liberty is completely different than ours. So we're not allies on that front. So those are some of the issues. I would have preferred sharper differentiation, sharper disagreement, better kind of combative, in a sense, polite but combative responses, and then not presented as if we're allies. We're not. We're not on the same side. Not on the fundamental questions that will shape the world in the future. Thank you, everybody. Really, really appreciate it. I'll see you all tomorrow, 3 p.m. East Coast time. Tomorrow, 3 p.m. East Coast time, we're going to talk about capitalism and tradition. Do they go together? Capitalism and tradition. And then next week, we'll do Yaron's Rules for Life Part 2. Rules for Life Part 2, either on Monday or Wednesday next week. Bye, everybody. See you soon. Have a great rest of your